You think fencing me out of my own ranch is going to stop me? I muttered, stepping down from my truck as gravel crunched beneath my boots. The morning was dead quiet except for the glint of a brand new gate, 10 feet tall, chained and padlocked. It stretched across the only road leading to the center of my property, a road my father and I built with our own hands, a road that meant more than just access. It was history, blood and sweat. And now, strangers had shut it down. I'm Cole Matheson, former firefighter, now full-time rancher, and son of a man who believed in hard work and legacy. This land, it's not just soil and grass. It's the only thing my father left me that can't be measured in dollars. And now they think they can just lock me out of it? Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to deal with a power-hungry HOA or a neighbor who crossed the line, hit that subscribe button. You're going to feel this one. My father passed away 4 years ago, pancreatic cancer, the kind that doesn't give you time to fight, just time to prepare. Before he got too weak, we took one final walk down that road. He called it the artery of the ranch. It connected the barn, the tanks, the shed, the fence line. He built it with a borrowed grader and stubborn pride. I watched him scatter alfalfa seed with one hand while gripping my shoulder with the other. You take care of this place, son. Don't let anybody claim what's ours. I hadn't thought much about that warning until this morning, when I saw the sign posted to the new gate. Public entry, access restricted, under Hillside Development Authority. Hillside Development, otherwise known as the HOA in disguise, run by a woman named Pamela Drexler, who wore a linen blouse like a badge of honor and carried herself like she ran a courtroom. They'd been sniffing around for months. First, it was a complaint about my tractor being visible from the road. Then it was a noise violation when we had the church cookout last fall. I ignored them, figured they'd move on. I figured wrong. I got back in my truck and took the long way around, bouncing over an old utility path that hadn't been graded in years. By the time I reached the barn, my back hurt and my patience was gone. My son, Lucas, was in the loft fixing his drone. He climbed down when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" My mom's lobby was burning around him. The main road put up a gate. Who did? Pamela and her crew. HOA says it's their jurisdiction now. He blinked, but that's our... I didn't have an answer that would make sense to a 16-year-old. Hell, it didn't make sense to me either. That night, I sat on the porch with an old photo album. My dad, shirtless, dusty, smiling wide, next to a teenage me as we spread gravel. Behind us, that road, a living line that ran through the heart of our lives. Lucas came out and sat beside me. "Meg, I can't just take it," he said. "No, but they think they already did." The next morning, I was at the county records office the moment they opened. I didn't ask for a fight. I asked for files, maps, land deeds, access easements, anything with my name or my father's or that road. Took about an hour before I found it. A clause buried in an old easement agreement from 40 years ago. The county had retained the right-of-ways for emergency and agricultural use, which meant that road didn't belong to the HOA. It never did. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. They made the first move, but they didn't know I'd come ready for the long game. The padlock might have been new, but my key was older than their whole development. I wasn't going to fight them with rage. I was going to bury them in paperwork. And I'd start with the truth they never bothered to check. I left the county records office with a folder so thick it barely fit in my glove box. Driving home, I didn't rush. I took the old route again, the one they tried to erase. Dust kicked up behind my tires as I passed that ridiculous gate. It was quiet now, like it was daring me to test it. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I drove the long way again. This time I was smiling. I'd found the leverage. The land deed from 1982 had it written in plain black ink. Access granted to the property owner and direct descendants for the purpose of agriculture, maintenance, and emergency services. The HOA couldn't own that road. They didn't even have legal standing to modify it. They had just hoped no one would check. Lucas was working the water pump when I pulled in. He saw the folder in my hand and raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Proof," I said, tossing it on the workbench. "They don't own the road, we do." His grin was instant. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "we wait, and we document everything. That week, the HOA got real creative. Tuesday, I found a warning letter duct taped to my mailbox. Unauthorized gravel dumping on shared property. I hadn't dumped gravel. That was the same stretch of road my father poured 30 years ago. But they weren't after facts. They were fishing. Wednesday, I got a fine for excessive light pollution. That one made Lucas laugh, until he realized they meant the single barn light he left on overnight while checking the calves. Friday, it got worse. I came home from town to see a bright orange violation tag on my fence post. Infraction notice. Temporary structure in view of public thoroughfare. It was a scarecrow. An actual scarecrow, stuffed with straw and duct-taped jeans. We'd made it together 2 months back. Lucas named him Tractor Joe. Now apparently, Tractor Joe was a violation. I didn't call them. I didn't yell. I just took pictures. Every tag. Every letter, every absurd claim. I was building a case, and they were handing me evidence for free. Then came the HOA meeting. I showed up on time, boots dusted off, hat in hand. They held it in the clubhouse down the hill. The room smelled like air freshener and stale control. Pamela Drexler stood at the front like she was addressing a jury. Her blouse was tucked in tight, her hair coiled like a warning sign. She barely glanced at me when I entered. "Residents," she said, "will begin with enforcement updates." When it came time for public comments, I stood. "My name is Cole Matheson. I own the ranch on the south end." Pamela didn't blink. "You're not part of Hillside Development." "That's what I'm here to clarify," I said. "Your recent fencing effort cut off county land that was never part of your zone. I have the deed here." Pamela raised her hand like a traffic cop. "This forum is not for legal disputes. If you have concerns, please submit them in writing." She moved on to the next person like I was never there. I left the room calm, but my jaw was locked so tight I thought I'd crack a molar. Back at home, I handed the violation notices to Lucas. "File these, by date. How many do we need before this becomes harassment?" "More," I said, "but we're getting there." That night, I stood at the fence line, eyes tracing the gate in the moonlight, not for weakness, for pattern. They wanted me angry, they wanted me to react, but I wasn't giving them that. I remembered something Dad used to say when the droughts got bad. You can't out-yell the sun, you just dig deeper for water. That's what I was doing now, quiet, focused, digging. They thought they could bury me in petty rules, but they were just giving me shovels. By Sunday morning, the violations slowed, not because they were done, but because they'd run out of creative ways to be petty. That silence, it wasn't peace. It was calculation. I spent the quiet hours inspecting the fence line again. Same gate, same lock, but something had shifted. Me. I wasn't pacing anymore. I was mapping. Every post, every nail, every scrap of twisted logic they'd used to box me in was now part of a growing blueprint for their undoing. Lucas followed me out with a fresh coffee and a crooked grin. "You look like a man with a plan." "I've got something better," I said. "A pattern. See, when someone's trying to keep you out, they start thinking in corners, rules, angles, traps. But when you've built the place from the ground up, you don't think in walls. You think in flow. In rhythm, in where the water drains and where the land swells just enough to hide a fence post gone crooked." And that's when I saw it. Post 27. The ground dipped just enough to shift the line by a foot. A whole foot into my land. I marked it and drove straight to the county plat office. I requested the original property overlay and compared it with the new fencing plan submitted by Hillside Development. There it was, faint but clear. The new fence wasn't just illegal, it was trespassing. I called Rita Vaughn. Now Rita and I hadn't talked in a while, not since her uncle's estate sale where we bid against each other for a vintage saddle. She won, I let her. She knew law like I knew livestock, and she had a particular dislike for suburban overreach. She answered on the second ring. "Cole Matheson, let me guess. They finally tried to steal something that bleeds?" "Close," I said. "They fenced off my access road, crossed my line by 14 inches. You got documents?" "Certified." "Come in tomorrow," she said. "Bring your coffee strong and your temper cold." The next day, I laid everything on her desk, maps, violations, dated photos, and one annotated survey report. Rita didn't smile. She studied. Then leaned back and nodded. Am I messed up? I know. No, she said. I mean legally, structurally, municipally. This isn't even a gray area. This is white-hot negligence. She walked me through the strategy. First, a cease and desist on the encroachment. Then, a demand for gate removal based on easement law. And if that failed, a formal civil claim for trespassing and obstruction of access to agricultural infrastructure. I don't want their money, I said. You won't need it, she replied. But they'll offer it anyway. When they start losing ground, they try to buy silence. Outside her office, I called Lucas. Start organizing the violation notices by type. You expecting something? A counterpunch. Back at the ranch, I took a detour by the pond. It was low from drought, but still clean. I leaned against the old post my dad and I used to tie the flatboat to. I remembered something he said once, when a neighbor tried to sneak cattle onto our grazing strip. It's not about what they take, it's about what you let them walk away with. Pamela Drexler thought she was dealing with a man too proud to fight smart. She figured a locked gate would rattle me into compliance. She didn't count on Rita. Or on me watching instead of yelling. That evening, I installed a game camera facing the gate, not to catch trespassers, but to catch reactions. A locked gate has a way of making people feel invincible. They don't look up. They don't think they're being watched. But I was watching, and now I was ready, not to break in, but to break it wide open. On paper, in court, and on every inch of land that still had my father's boot prints buried beneath the dust. And if you've ever been underestimated by someone who thought they had all the control, tell me in the comments, what was your moment of turning the tables? And if you're rooting for the quiet ones who fight smart, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started. The gate was only the beginning. I knew it, Rita knew it, and as of last night, the camera confirmed it. The footage from the motion-activated game cam showed two of Pamela Drexler's board members standing at the gate around midnight. Flashlights in hand, one pointed at the camera, then flipped it off with a smirk before walking off. They weren't guarding anything. They were scouting, looking for a weak point. And Lucas watched the clip over my shoulder. What do they want now? Same thing they always want, I said. Control. It wasn't just the road anymore. 2 days later, I woke up to a new letter shoved into the gate latch. Notification of utility review. Apparently, Hillside Development was evaluating community water usage and planned to inspect and possibly consolidate irrigation infrastructure for environmental responsibility. In plain English, they wanted to reroute my water supply, my tanks, my lines, my flow. That crossed a line deeper than a fence ever could. I loaded the truck and drove to the far end of the ranch, where the old water tank sat beside the rocky slope. My dad welded those tanks himself in '93. I'd painted them 3 times over the years, each time with Lucas by my side. They'd survived storms, droughts, and even that flood in 2010 when the cattle swam in mud for 2 weeks. And now Pamela Drexler wanted to run a clipboard through it? Rita met me on site just after noon. She had her sunglasses perched low and a manila folder thick enough to level a small animal. "Am I really think they can touch this?" I asked. "They don't just think it," she replied, flipping open the file. "They filed a request with the county under your name, falsified signature and all." I blinked. "They forged my name?" Rita nodded, dead serious. "Pamela's betting you won't catch it fast enough to stop it before the inspectors come through." I took a slow breath. "Then we stop it now." Rita pulled out her phone and dialed the county clerk. "Hi, yes?" "Vaughn, environmental attorney, ID 2970, requesting immediate freeze on application 486B regarding utility redirection on agricultural land." "Yes." "Citing forgery suspicion and lack of consent from the registered landowner." "Yes." "I'll send the signed affidavit within the hour." She hung up and smirked. "It's frozen. For now." I stared at the tanks. "They're coming harder now." "Because they're losing," she said. "And people who lose don't get smarter. They get louder." Back at the ranch, I started reinforcing the tank access zone. Not with aggression, with visibility. Signs, flags, drone flyovers. Every camera we had went up on a pole. I wanted them to see that I wasn't hiding anymore. That night, we got a knock on the door. Ray and Dottie Sanders, my elderly neighbors, stood in the porch light, both holding envelopes. "They fined us," Dottie said, shaking. "Said we assisted unauthorized land use because we let Lucas borrow our wheelbarrow last week." Lucas's mouth dropped open. "Are you serious?" Ray nodded. $175. I stepped down the porch stairs. "They're targeting you now." Ray shrugged, but his shoulders were heavy. "We don't want trouble. We just wanted to help." "No," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong. They did." I called Rita again. "Add Ray and Dottie to the case. Harassment, third-party pressure, whatever sticks." "You're building a wall now?" she said. "Not out of wood, out of paper and truth." The next morning, I hand-delivered a formal notice to the Hillside Board. I left it right in Pamela's manicured mailbox with the certified green receipt sticking out like a warning flag. Cease and desist, signed by me. Backed by Rita. Filed with the county. They wanted water? Now they were swimming in legal paperwork. I didn't wait for Pamela to respond to the cease and desist. I already knew how she'd play it. Deny, delay, distract. That was her pattern. But this time, I wasn't waiting to see the ending. I was writing it myself. The legal side was handled. Rita was filing faster than Pamela could blink. But now I needed something more symbolic. Something that didn't just speak in paper and courtrooms, but shouted without saying a word. I called it Operation Gate Crash. First thing I did was drive 2 towns over to a salvage yard that had been around since before I was born. The owner, Rusty, met me out front with a crooked smile and the scent of grease in his beard. "Looking for anything specific?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Something heavy, old, metal, and hard to ignore." He scratched his head, then led me to a rusted steel gate latch from an old rail yard transfer station. It weighed more than a car jack and looked like it had sealed a few vaults in its time. "This'll hold back a buffalo if you want it to." "Perfect," I said, lifting it into my truck bed. Back at the ranch, I mounted the latch onto my side of the access gate. Legally mine, thanks to the easement clause, but I didn't just secure it. I forged a key for it. Not a plastic copy, a real, industrial-grade key. Something you could feel the weight of in your palm. Lucas watched me finish the welding. "That looks like it belongs in a prison." "It does," I said, "but not for us." Then I printed 1 copy of the key. 1. I had it engraved with 2 words, Matheson Access. It wasn't about keeping them out, it was about reminding them who was already in. By the end of the day, I had mounted signs along the legal property boundary. Access road maintained under private easement. Unauthorized entry prohibited. Rita approved the wording down to the punctuation. The next morning, I arrived early at the gate with a lawn chair and a thermos. I set the chair up just a few yards from the fence line and waited. Pamela arrived 30 minutes later in a luxury crossover, her sunglasses already halfway down her nose. She stepped out with a leather folio tucked under her arm, like she was heading into court. "You're trespassing," she said immediately. I gestured to the camera mounted behind me. "On my land? That'd be a neat trick." "You altered the lock." "I secured it," I said, "for safety. Wouldn't want any unauthorized inspections causing accidents." Her lips tightened. "This isn't over, Mr. Matheson." "No, Mrs. Drexler," I said calmly. "This is just the part where you stop pretending you're the sheriff." She turned on her heel, back stiff, and drove off without another word. That afternoon, I had the lock notarized, not because I needed to, but because I wanted the paper trail stamped in ink. A second copy of the key went into a safety deposit box. The first, I kept in my front pocket. It clicked like a revolver every time I twisted it open, a sound that didn't need words. Lucas came home from school and found me working in the shop. "You know they're going to come back harder, right?" "I'm counting on it," I said. "That's how they'll trip." He paused. "It's kind of funny. They locked you out, and now they need permission to even reach their own fence." "It's not about locking people out," I told him. "It's about reminding them that no matter how many gates they put up, it's the land that answers to history, and this land doesn't remember their names." That night, I placed the key on the table beside the old photograph of my dad holding the surveyor's map with me at age 12. We were standing where the fence is now. I looked at the photo and smiled. We were still standing there. The key stayed on the table beside my father's photo, catching the early light like it belonged there. I left it untouched. not because I was being sentimental, but because it reminded me exactly who I was doing this for. Pamela made her next move by morning. She'd escalated again, accusing me of violating community safety protocols by installing my own lock on my own gate and warning of daily fines unless it was removed. It was the kind of message designed to intimidate, cold, corporate, and dripping with control. I didn't reply. I forwarded it to Rita. Her response was blunt. "Don't respond, let's make this public." An hour later, she pulled into my drive with a reporter riding shotgun. Ellie Cross from the Valley Ledger. She wasn't the flashy type, dressed like she'd rather be hiking than holding a microphone, but she carried herself with the quiet focus of someone who noticed everything. She walked the property before asking a single question. When she finally spoke, it was by the gate. "You always sit out here?" she asked, pointing to the chair I'd placed beside the fence. "Only when someone tries to erase something they don't understand," I said. Lucas leaned over from the porch. "Ask him what the lock code is." Ellie smiled. "All right, what is it?" I reached into my pocket, held up the key. A small brass tag was attached. 1776. She raised an eyebrow. "Any reason?" "My father's favorite year," I said. "He called it the year people stopped waiting to be told they were free." The next morning, Ellie's article went live. Front page, a photo of me standing at the gate, arms crossed, key in hand. The headline made its point without shouting. That story hit harder than I expected. Calls started coming in. Neighbors, old friends, ranchers I hadn't seen in years. A retired judge sent me a copy of a precedent case. Strangers offered to testify if this thing ever made it to court. Turns out I wasn't the only one sick of being told where my land ended by people who never set foot in dirt. I stayed quiet, no interviews, no grandstanding, just work. That Saturday, Hillside called a mandatory meeting. Held at their gleaming clubhouse with air conditioning strong enough to freeze resentment. I brought Rita. She showed up in boots and brought 2 binders, thicker than anything the HOA had ever filed. Lucas came too. He carried a handmade poster that said, "We don't need permission to exist," his idea. I didn't argue. When we walked in, the room shifted. This time, it wasn't just HOA members staring me down. It was residents, neighbors, even a few folks who'd stayed silent until now. Pamela stood at the front like nothing had changed. "It's come to our attention that some residents have taken actions that may threaten the integrity of our community safety standards." Rita stood. "Before you continue, I'd like to distribute some materials." She handed out printed packets, easement deeds, the notarized lock documentation, and the forged utility forms that bore my name but not my signature. Pamela's smile cracked, just slightly. "This isn't a legal hearing." "No," Rita said, "but what you've done has legal consequences." Then Mitch Bailey, one of the more quiet board members, spoke up. "I got one of those forms too. Same forgery. My drainage reroute. I never approved it." The air shifted again. Not loud, but tight. I stood. I didn't build fences. I built a ranch. With my father, with my son. We didn't ask permission to do it, and we're not asking permission to stay. Then I sat down. Pamela looked around like she was searching for someone to save her, but no one spoke. That silence said more than any fine she could ever write. If you've ever had to defend something that mattered, your land, your rights, your family, drop a comment below and tell me what you stood up for. And if you believe in quiet strength over loud control, hit that subscribe button. The real fight is just beginning. After the meeting, Pamela didn't speak to me. She didn't have to. Her silence was loud enough, tight-lipped, spine straight, hands fidgeting just enough to betray her calm. She left the clubhouse in a hurry, binder clutched like a lifeline. But I knew better. We weren't done. We were at deadlock. The next few days were quiet, almost too quiet. No new notices, no surprise visits, not even a patrol car creeping past the gate. It felt like the eye of a storm. But I'd seen too many fires break wide open after the winds died down to trust it. Lucas was the first to spot it. He came into the kitchen, phone in hand, a nervous edge in his voice. "They're sending private security." "Where'd you hear that?" I asked. "Group chat. Mitch leaked it. Said the board voted on it late last night. They're calling it temporary neighborhood stabilization." I set my coffee down. They're not here to protect. They're here to provoke. And they arrived fast. Three black trucks with a company logo I'd never seen before rolled into the development's main road like they were preparing for a parade. Armed guards stepped out, clipped radios at their shoulders, eyes hidden behind mirrored sunglasses. And sure enough, within the hour, two of them stood across from my gate. Outside my line, but close enough to make a point. I didn't give them one. Instead, I grabbed the camera footage from the last 3 days, stitched together all the moments they crossed visual boundaries, tracked residents with flashlights, or hovered near fences that didn't belong to them. Then I handed it off to Rita. "This is harassment with boots," she said, watching a clip of one of the guards tailing Ray on his evening walk. "They're banking on intimidation because they've lost the law." Rita filed the footage as part of our ongoing claim. Meanwhile, I did what they didn't expect. I opened the gate. Not to them, but to my neighbors. I invited Ray and Dottie for dinner. Mitch showed up too, looking more tired than defiant. "I didn't think it'd get this far," he said, staring out at the floodlight aimed at the pasture line. "Pamela convinced us it was about keeping the neighborhood clean, safe." "And now?" I asked. He shook his head. "Now she's turning it into a siege." Lucas brought out plates. We ate on the porch, quietly, the way people do when words aren't big enough for the shift they feel happening. That night, I walked the perimeter of my land alone. I wasn't patrolling. I was remembering. Every fence post, every tree line, every turn of soil, where my dad taught me the value of straight lines and stubborn patience. By the water tanks, I stopped. One of the guards had tossed a crushed soda can near the base. I picked it up, placed it in a sealed bag, and labeled it, "Private Security, Trespass Evidence, 10:42 p.m. They weren't just pressing in, they were sloppy now, and that sloppiness was going to cost them. The next morning, Rita came by with an update. "The county judge wants a hearing." "Where when?" "Soon. They're calling an emergency review of all actions taken by Hillside Development, everything from the forged utility request to the harassment of residents. You'll need to testify." I nodded. "I'll be there." Rita looked out toward the open road, where the trucks still sat like props in a bad play. "They've boxed themselves in, Cole. Every move they make now tightens the loop." "Good," I said. "Let them pull their own nut." She smiled. "Let's just make sure you're the one holding the rope when they do." The next time I saw Pamela, she didn't say a word. She didn't have to. Her eyes saw the writing on the wall, and for the first time since this all began, she looked like she knew this was bigger than a fence. It was a reckoning. The hearing was still days away, but you could feel the shift already. Hillside Development wasn't acting like an authority anymore. They were moving like a cornered animal, cautious, jittery, showing their teeth just to remind everyone they still had them, but the bite was gone. What they didn't know was that one of their own was about to pull the last brick from the wall. Mitch Bailey showed up on my property just after sundown. No notice, no hesitation, just a quiet knock on the barn door while I was checking tools for the winter equipment run. "I need to talk," he said, stepping inside before I answered. He looked tired, more honest than I'd ever seen him. The smug HOA face was gone. What replaced it was something heavier, guilt mixed with a quiet kind of resolve. "I went along with too much," he said. "Pamela told us you were a threat, that you were trying to stir up a lawsuit to drain the HOA budget, that we had to be proactive." "And you believed her?" I asked, not sharp, just steady. "I did," he said, "until she crossed the line with Ray and Dottie, and then the forged documents. And now the security guys, they're not reporting to the board anymore, they're reporting to her directly." That got my attention. "She's gone off book." Mitch nodded. "She's protecting herself now, not the community." He reached into his coat and pulled out a flash drive. "Board meeting recordings, private ones, before votes, after hours. You'll hear her say it herself. 'If we rattle him hard enough, he'll sell,' her exact words." I stared at the drive. "Why bring it to me?" "Because I'm tired of being quiet," Mitch said, "and because she tried to have me removed from the board yesterday, said I was sympathetic to rural interests." "Sympathetic to rural interests?" I repeated. "Is that code for owns a spine?" We both smiled. It was the first laugh I'd heard on this property in weeks. I called Rita that night and handed over the flash drive. She didn't say much, just one word: perfect. The next morning, she sent a formal motion to the county judge requesting the recordings be entered into the record. Her voice on the phone had a cool edge to it, like she already knew what came next. "This isn't just harassment anymore," she said. This is targeted coercion, and now, thanks to Mitch, we can prove it's deliberate. Lucas watched me from the porch as I hung a new sign near the fence. Trespassers will be recorded, prosecuted, and featured in our defense exhibit. He grinned. You think they'll take the hint? No, I said, but they'll hear the message in court. That afternoon, Pamela showed up. No board members, no press, just her, walking up the edge of the legal boundary with a clipboard she wasn't reading and sunglasses she didn't need. She stood about 5 feet from the gate. This doesn't have to keep going, she said. I didn't answer. We can settle this quietly, she added. There's no reason for things to get public. I stepped forward just far enough to meet her eyes. You had Ray and Dottie fined for handing over a wheelbarrow. You tried to take our water, you forged my signature, and now you're hiring guards to stand where they don't belong. She swallowed but kept her chin high. You've made your point. No, I said, you made mine. Then I turned my back to her and walked away. I didn't need her reaction. I had the truth, the flash drive, and a hearing date. For the first time, I could feel the ground leaning in my direction. And more importantly, so could she. Pamela didn't show her face after that last day at the fence, not when the neighbors started whispering, not when her own board members began backing away from her decisions. Her absence wasn't an accident, it was strategy. The kind you try when your hand's been exposed, and there's no bluff left to play. The hearing was set for Thursday morning. Simple courtroom, no cameras, no ceremony. Just a judge, a few rows of benches, and the kind of silence that says everything's about to matter. I arrived early. Rita was already there, walking up the steps with her binder hugged tight to her side. Mitch stood by the courthouse door, hands in his pockets, flash drive nowhere in sight. But we both knew it was already doing its work. You bring the key? Rita asked. I tapped my coat pocket. Inside, Hillside's remaining board looked like a broken picket fence, bent in different directions, gaps between them, unsure who still stood for what. Pamela's seat was empty. Official word was she was out of state for medical reasons. Unofficially, she'd decided to vanish before the gavel dropped. The judge opened the hearing by name and case, Matheson v. Hillside Development. No need for introductions. Everyone in the room already knew who had done what. Rita went first. She didn't dress the case up, she stripped it down. Illegally fenced easement, forged documents filed with the county, harassment disguised as enforcement, unauthorized private security crossing lines they had no right to, each point backed by time-stamped photos, paperwork, and Mitch's now famous recording. Pamela's voice filled the room through a tinny speaker. If we rattle him hard enough, he'll sell. He's just one man and an old road. When the judge looked up from her notes, she turned to me. Mr. Matheson, do you have anything to add? I stepped forward, calm, steady. I reached into my coat and pulled out the small wooden box I'd brought. I opened it slowly. Inside was the forged utility request with my name copied in a handwriting that wasn't mine, and beside it, the key. Brass, heavy. The engraving still crisp. Matheson Access Code 1776. I didn't raise my voice. I'm not here to win an argument, I said. I'm here because someone tried to erase a piece of my family and thought they'd get away with it. My father built that road. It's the only thing he left me that couldn't be sold, only taken, and they tried. I closed the box. The judge said nothing, just a small nod. This court will return with a ruling at 2 p.m. Outside, the sun was flat and bright, the kind of day that didn't need drama to feel permanent. Lucas met us near the truck with 2 sandwiches and a bottle of lemonade like we were there for a picnic, not a verdict. You think it's over? He asked. I looked down the road. It's just getting settled. We ate quietly. No speeches. No speeches were needed. At 2 sharp we went back in. The ruling came quick. The gate? To be removed. My lock? Legal. Every violation and fine sent to me or my neighbors? Voided. And Hillside Development was ordered to pay damages for trespass, harassment, and filing falsified documents. But it was the last part that hit hardest. The easement road, the judge said, is now fully under the legal stewardship of Mr. Matheson and his heirs. Lucas turned to me. That means me, right? I smiled. If you want it. We walked out not as winners, but as owners, not just of the land, but of the truth. Back at the ranch, I walked up to the gate. The brass key turned once, clean and final. The sound echoed a little louder than usual. The road was open again. No one else would ever try to close it. ChatGPT said, "If you've ever had to fight for something that should have been yours all along, tell me in the comments, what did you protect and why did it matter? And if you believe that legacy speaks louder than authority, hit that subscribe button. The road always remembers who built it." The road was mine again, officially and on paper. The gate opened with the same key they once tried to bury me with. But this wasn't just about access anymore. The tables had turned, and Hillside Development, Pamela's proud invention, was about to get a taste of its own enforcement. 3 days after the ruling, a landscaping crew from Hillside showed up. I watched from my porch as 2 trucks pulled up near the shared fence line. They weren't on my land yet, but they were clearly gearing up to work on a drainage trench that cut across the old boundary, part of the same path they'd tried to control with that gate. One of the workers walked toward the easement road with a clipboard and a puzzled look. Then he stopped. There it was, the new sign. Private easement. Entry requires written consent. Authorized key holder, C. Matheson. He walked back to his truck. By sunset, both vehicles were gone. Not a single shovel touched dirt. Lucas leaned against the porch rail, watching it all unfold like it was some outdoor play. "So, now what?" he asked. "Now," I said, "we make it clear that just because they built around us doesn't mean they ever built over us." I didn't retaliate with lawsuits or fences. I didn't have to. I had control of the road physically, legally, and strategically. The next week, I installed a gate pass system. Not high-tech, not flashy, just a basic toll box with an old-school keypad. Above it, another sign. Community access, $100 0 cents per vehicle. Proceeds benefit local livestock shelter. It wasn't about the money. It was about reminding them they needed permission. And now, they had to pay for something they once stole. Word spread fast. A few of the neighbors clapped when they passed by. Others looked away, and then, as expected, the complaints started rolling in. Emails, letters, a phone call from the new interim HOA president, a man named Gerald who spoke like he'd inherited a ticking time bomb. "Mr. Matheson, we'd like to request removal of the toll system to encourage unity and cooperation." "Funny," I said. "That's what I wanted when I asked you to unlock my road months ago." He cleared his throat. "We were under different leadership then. Then maybe it's time you start walking instead of driving." Click. That toll box didn't just control traffic, it controlled their pride, and for the first time, they had to knock, not bark. One morning, I walked the road with Ray and Dottie. They hadn't said much since the court win, but today they brought a thermos of coffee and 2 folding chairs. "We figured this stretch was a good place to sit and watch people learn some manners," Dottie said, handing me a cup. Ray added, "I never thought I'd see the day they had to pay to cross what they claimed they owned." "They never owned it," I said. "They just tried to act like they did until someone pushed back." We sat for an hour, just sipping coffee and waving as a confused delivery driver read the sign and backed up. It was peaceful, not smug, just right. The next day, I found a small envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a folded note. "Respectfully requesting permission for access to deliver firewood to Lot 12. Willing to comply with your terms. Thank you for your consideration." No threats, no regulations, just a request. It felt like a foreign language after everything that had happened. I called the number on the note. "Permission granted," I said. "Just knock before you cross." The man chuckled, relieved. "Appreciate that. It's good to see someone with the road who actually understands what it means." So I let him through. Not because I had to, but because I could. And that difference? That's what power really looks like when it's earned, not taken. By the time firewood was being delivered through my gate by request, I knew the war was over, but the cleanup, that was still unfolding. It started with the calls, residents asking what rules still stood, who was in charge now, whether the HOA even still existed in the same way it had before. Power vacuum's a funny thing. It doesn't just go quiet, it stirs panic. And this time, no one was pointing at me, they were pointing inward. Then came the paperwork, not from the HOA but from the court. Rita brought it by herself, still crisp from the clerk's stamp. The ruling wasn't just a judgment, It was a wake-up call that echoed far beyond a gate and a gravel road. The court had officially declared Hillside's leadership in breach of fiduciary duty. Pamela's name sat at the top of every page, her forged documents laid bare. The judge's summary was direct. Intentional manipulation, negligent oversight, and sustained abuse of authority. And it didn't stop there. The court ordered an audit of Hillside Development's entire governance, every vote, every expenditure, every closed-door meeting, under review. The interim board wasn't just on thin ice, they were standing on the edge of a legal sinkhole. Rita sat across from me at the kitchen table as I read the ruling again. They melted down the place like a private kingdom, she said, sipping her tea. Turns out they weren't even following their own charter. Lucas wandered in and glanced at the folder. So, they're finished? I nodded. They're finished pretending they were in charge. A week later, the community held its first town hall since the hearing, but this time it wasn't in the Hillside Clubhouse. That door was locked, pending audit. So, they held it in the old Grange Hall down near the creek, neutral ground. Wooden floors, metal chairs, the smell of coffee and sweat instead of cologne and clipped authority. I didn't speak, I didn't need to. My presence was enough. Gerald, the interim president, stood at the front, visibly sweating through his dress shirt. We're recommending a full dissolution of the current HOA structure pending results of the investigation, he announced. A murmur ran through the room. It wasn't outrage, it was relief. Then someone from the back stood up. Dottie. Her voice was clear, no microphone needed. I move we never give that kind of power to one person again. Applause followed, not wild, but steady, like something real had finally been put back in place. After the meeting, Ray caught up with me outside. You know, he said, a few months ago I thought we'd have to move. We were tired, felt small. And now? Now, he said, I think I'll plant tomatoes in the spring. We shook hands, and for the first time it wasn't out of shared frustration, it was quiet affirmation. Later that night, Lucas asked me what I was going to do with the gate. Leave it, I said. It's not there to keep people out anymore. It's there to remind them how far people went just to walk through it. He thought about that. Then said, maybe we should hang a plaque. What would it say? He didn't hesitate. The road fought back. I smiled. Might have been the best idea he ever had. And maybe that's what real justice looks like, when the people who had no voice finally get to name the road, when the courtroom's words become more than paper, when the land stops being a battleground and becomes a place to live again. That night, I locked the gate, not because I had to, but because now I got to choose when to open it. Spring arrived early that year. The frost gave up by February, and wild clover had already started creeping across the fence line like it knew peace had finally returned. The ranch felt different now, not just lighter, but quieter in the way only hard-won land can be. The kind of quiet you don't take for granted. The gate still stood at the edge of the easement road, same lock, same engraved tag, but it didn't feel like a boundary anymore. It felt like punctuation, a full stop at the end of a long, hard sentence. Lucas came out one morning with a wooden plaque in hand, letters carved into it with care. He held it up proudly. If the road fought back. I nodded, taking it from him. Let's mount it. We placed it right on the inside post, facing the ranch, not the street. Not for them, for us. A reminder that the fight wasn't about keeping people out. It was about never letting anyone take what wasn't theirs again. That afternoon, neighbors started dropping by, not because they were nervous anymore, but because they wanted to talk. Not whisper, talk. Ray brought seedlings for tomatoes. Dottie brought pie. Even Mitch came, hands full of reclaimed lumber he said I might use for fence repairs. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. Funny, he said, setting down the boards, how much lighter this place feels now that nobody's trying to own it. It was never theirs to begin with, I replied. They just fooled themselves into thinking they could lease control. He chuckled, then paused, looking at the road behind me. I heard Pamela sold her house, packed up last week. I didn't react much. Guess the fences weren't enough to keep her in either. We sat on the porch for a while that evening, sipping coffee, watching the easement stretch out like a ribbon into the horizon, uninterrupted. Lucas joined us and leaned his elbows on the railing. You think they'll try again someday? He asked. Someone always does, I said, but now this place knows how to push back. He looked at the gate, then at the sky. Still glad we didn't rip it out? I smiled. You don't erase your story once you've written it. You keep it where people can see it. That night, I walked the length of the road under the stars. No patrol cars, no shadowy board members with clipboards, just a stretch of gravel my dad carved through the soil with a rented machine and raw resolve. Halfway down, I stopped. There was a breeze coming in off the west, warm and light. Not dramatic, not symbolic, just air moving through a space finally left alone. And that, more than the judgment, the paperwork, the plaque, that breeze was the win. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't watching my back. I was walking my road. And if you're watching this video while dealing with your own HOA nightmare, remember, the gate doesn't close forever. Sometimes all it takes is the right moment, the right key, and the will to outlast those who thought they'd never be challenged.